Hello and welcome to My Security TV and our Tech and Sec Weekly. My name's Chris Cubbage. I'm the Executive Editor with My Security Media. Today we're going to be joined by Tracy Reinhold, the Chief Security Officer with Everbridge. We're going to be looking at enterprise-level security strategy with Everbridge. Without further ado, please welcome Tracy Reinhold. Tracy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Chris. Pleasure to be here.
Wonderful. And I believe you've just landed in Australia very early, but I imagine you might have been here before. Have you been in Australia before?
I have been in Australia before. It's been several years, but it's always good to be back.
Well, welcome back. And Everbridge, we'll learn a little bit more about Everbridge, but you've got a very interesting background. And I always prefer speaking to chief security officers. We speak to a lot of chief information security officers and the like, but the chief security officer has a wider remit in my mind. Maybe just talk us into your role as CSO with Everbridge and a bit about your background as well. And I think that'll set a good setting for our conversation.
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Chris. I appreciate it. So as you said, I am the Chief Security Officer for Everbridge. Unlike a lot of chief security officers, one of my primary focuses is on strategy, both internal and external. How the organization provides the requirements for the customer and how the customer actually understands and leverages technology to protect their interests. What we need to remember always is that security's job is to enable the business. And we do that in a whole host of different ways. But if you think about security and the core business, if you don't understand the core business, you really can't provide effective security, which means you're not actually enabling the organization. Traditionally over the years, security has been the department of no, right? Yeah. So what we're trying to do, part of that strategy is to change that dynamic. So in order to change that dynamic, we have to understand what matters, how we effectively protect what matters, and how we enable the business to establish and maintain a resilient posture so that they can maintain that operational tempo that leads to revenue generation and success. Traditionally, security has not necessarily looked at the larger enterprise, and they have looked myopically at security for security's sake. You can always create an airtight security posture. The problem with that is you can't actually effectively do business. So just like anything else in the world, security is about compromise and about risk tolerance and risk acceptance. So when you think about that, that's how you should develop your strategy. So a little bit about my background. First of all, I'm very fortunate to be at Everbridge. I think it's a wonderful company, but I'm here because of mission, which sounds sort of silly from a corporate security perspective, but I spent 22 years in the Federal Bureau of Investigation in the United States and retired as the Deputy Head for National Security. Took a couple of other stops before I got to Everbridge. I was the Chief Security Officer at Fannie Mae, which is a financial services company, secondary mortgage lending industry in Washington, D.C., and was a Corporate Vice President for the Fortune 1 company in the world, Walmart. What I was missing in those was the sense of mission and the sense of purpose that's why I liked public service. And one of the things I like about Everbridge is what we do matters, and the mission always comes first. So with that in mind, it was an easy transition for me to think about the strategic vision of the organization and to help my peers around the globe understand the value of technology when it comes to security. And then further to really sort of evangelize the idea of the confluence or the convergence of digital and physical security, and what that means for the world going forward.
One of the questions I had as you were talking, and I do a bit of strategy work as well in certain areas. One is you sort of encapsulated the approach, but I was going to say, where would sometimes be your starting point? And then also from a client perspective, and even in your role with Everbridge, is who do you find you're talking to? Do you have a point of contact that you tend to find this is the trend in the market, or do you tend to be dealing with a board level or the C-suite level as a team? How do you find, what's your observations when you're dealing with customers and even back into government as well? Do you find that you have to have a broad set of stakeholders that you have to engage with, or you tend to have a point of contact?
So normally what we do is we come in through the CSO because that is potentially your economic buyer, somebody who's going to actually leverage the technology. That person may or may not actually have the capability to command the type of budget that they need.
Yep.
So part of my role is to help them understand how to develop executive champions in their own business. It's always easier when a revenue producing part of the company asks for something as opposed to security asking for something.
Got it.
I mean, I hate to say that out loud, but it's very, very true.
Yeah.
So part of it is helping them establish and maintain the relationships that they need to effectively enhance the organization's capabilities. And sometimes that means, you know, being a little bit humble and understanding where we fit as security into the overall fabric of the organization. So what I like to do is I deal a lot with CIOs, with CROs, with CSOs. I haven't said a single word, just a bunch of alphabet letters.
No, I understand you. That's the main thing.
Yes, yeah. So because of that, what we want to be able to convey to the customer or to the security professional is that it is an enterprise-wide effort to protect an organization. And we have to be very careful that we don't myopically focus on different things. So as an example, in financial services, when we think about risk, traditionally we've thought about regulatory risk.
Yeah.
So the focus for the CRO traditionally has been on regulatory risk, rightly so. But what that does is it creates opportunities for other threat vectors to manifest in the organization because we're not focused on those. Maybe the CSO, maybe the CISO, maybe your enterprise resilience team is looking at that. But if they're not collaborating horizontally, what it does is it creates an opportunity where risk lives. So one of the things that if you look at the chief risk officer, the CSO, and the CISO, if they're all driving down in separate lanes, in between those lanes is where risk and vulnerability lives. So the cross-pollination in an organizational structure is what actually creates that protective fabric that ensures that the organization has that 360-degree protective envelope that allows it to get ahead of threat, to address it, hopefully mitigate it before it manifests, or effectively recover from a business disruption. So when I think about strategy, the strategy will be actually a little bit different for every organization, depending on what their threats are and what their risks are. So it would be incredibly presumptuous of me to sit down with a client or a customer and say, these are your threats. Better than I listen to what they articulate as threats and risks and vulnerabilities, and then help them develop a comprehensive strategy that addresses that. Part of that strategy is really about collaboration, and collaboration starts with relationship building.
And it's also understanding who's driving that. Obviously, it needs to align with that business strategy. Everyone's a little bit different, as you said. That's why it's different. It's good to get those observations that you are dealing with risk officers and information security officers and security officers at that chief level, the C-suite level, because I think it does seem to change in different industries. But that maybe brings us to Everbridge as well, because you're a broad, you're not sort of stuck in a vertical. You're all enterprise related, and we'll come to your relevance here in Australia as well with the government level. Mm-hmm. But maybe explain us on Everbridge. I've got it up here in terms of the platform as well, but it's critical event management is sort of the key platform. Introduce us to Everbridge, particularly for those who may not have heard of Everbridge, and then we'll dive into the relevance here in Australia as well.
Okay, so let me. It's kind of a weird roundabout way of doing this, but let me just share this with you. When I was with the FBI, I would ask new executives in the organization, what do we do? And if the guy was a cyber executive or a counterterrorism executive, he would say, oh, well, we protect the world against cyber. We protect against terrorism. And my response was, what we do is to protect the American public. Everything else is how we do it. So with that in mind, as we look at Everbridge, what we do is enable organizations to establish and maintain a resilient posture. And we do that, if you look at it as a journey. The first thing that Everbridge does is have the capability to aggregate and deconflict intelligence. So we have an intelligence operations center that gathers intelligence from 25,000 disparate sources. We use AI and machine learning to create algorithms that sort of deconflict that intelligence down to what matters. So the only problem with intelligence is too much of it doesn't make any sense. It's just white noise. So by allowing the customer to determine what's important to them, the intelligence feed that they get from us is relevant to them and timely. So timeliness and relevance are critical when you think about intelligence aggregation and deconfliction. That's great. You have intelligence. Now, what do you do with it? So the next part of that process or that journey is to visualize that threat picture as it manifests against your assets. And by assets, we can be talking about physical locations or people, things that matter to you. So if you overlay the threat picture on your resources, it gives you a geolocation as to the proximity of threat, risk, and vulnerability to your organization. It's a visualization of that threat. Okay, now you've identified the threat, you've visualized the threat. Now, what do you do about it, right? So the other thing is you have to be able to respond. So there's two pieces of that. What we first talked about is everything left of boom, right? The aggregation and deconfliction and the visualization of threat. That allows you to potentially mitigate the impact of some of that threat by having advanced information relative to it and how it affects your organization. That doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have to respond. So response is actually accelerated through automation. The ability to notify all of your employees at the same time, or different groups of your employees with different messages simultaneously. So the platform allows you to preload approved communication templates to different parts of the organization. If, for example, you have a critical event, the board's going to want to know, the C-suite's going to want to know, but your incident response team's going to want to know, as well as your impacted employees. All of those messages are different, and the granularity of them varies depending on the audience. Having those all ready to go and then pushed out automatically accelerates the organization's response capability and shortens the duration of the disruption. Okay.
I take it it's also adaptable to what the situation is. There's different degrees and yeah.
Right. So here's if you remember nothing else, remember this, that it is threat and risk agnostic. The platform is not designed for a specific type of event. It is designed to establish and maintain resilience regardless of the business disruption. And that's a game changer, right? So the other piece of that is, so you've sent out your notifications, you've informed your employees, but sometimes you actually have to respond in person. So maybe you have employees in a war zone that need to be evacuated. Everbridge also leverages that capability. It's not just a SaaS company. We are an end-to-end resilience solution platform that allows organizations to survive. Or maybe you have a traveling employee who needs medical assistance. The organization maintains contracts with over 5,000 doctors around the world to provide that medical service to the employee if needed. So there are lots of other parts of the way that we do this, from ensuring safe journey management for employees. But when you think about it, what I've just described is all the things that we do that result in a resilient posture for an organization, because resilience is key, right? You have to maintain that ability to respond and recover quickly from disruptions. And disruptions manifest themselves in a multitude of ways. It could be something like an earthquake in New Zealand. It could be a tsunami in Singapore. It could be a brush fire in Australia, right?
But you've got relevance in sort of cyber as well, right? In terms of digital disruption. We
do. So, but I want to make it clear, we are not a cyber defense company.
Yeah.
Right. So we are a company that focuses on critical event management that leads to resilience. The biggest challenge with cyber is not so much the day zero, it's the day 5, 6, and 7.
Yeah.
When organizations don't have a concentrated strategy on how they're going to manage this cyber breach post-event. So the intelligence aggregation and deconfliction actually helps you identify new threat vectors when it comes to cyber. Dark web monitoring does the same thing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that we are the forensic analysis company that's going to come in and solve your ransomware problem. There are great partners of ours that do that, and that's great. And we can absolutely connect a company with one of our partners that does that. The bigger challenge is when the left hand of the company and the right hand of the company are disseminating different information to either their employees, shareholders, customers, or dependencies upstream or downstream. What that ends up doing is diluting the brand and reputation of the organization, undermining the value of the stock if it's publicly traded, and customers and others lose confidence in the company's ability to manage a critical event. By having a concerted, coordinated, and collaborative approach to the resolution of a disruption, such as cyber, what you're doing is sending a message that says, as an organization, we are prepared for business disruptions, and we are very solid, and we can recover from this quickly.
And consistency, I suppose, is another thing. Is there's no point responding to one incident really well, and then the next one comes along and you go bad. So at least you have a degree of consistency, right?
Right, but that's the beauty of the situation here. It's risk and threat agnostic. It doesn't matter if it's cyber or if it's a weather issue.
Yeah.
Or, you know, hopefully not, but if it's a terrorism issue maybe in Bali, right? So all of those things have to be recovered from. Some of them can be mitigated through the aggregation and deconfliction of intelligence and visualization of the threat, but occasionally you actually have to recover from those. So having a platform that allows you to seamlessly recover regardless of the business disruption is where you win as an organization. So what it means is that the face of security is changing, right? So what I like to say, what got us here is not going to get us there. So, we used to have a saying that, security is guards, gates, and guns.
Yeah.
Not anymore. That is no longer an effective strategy. Technology is the great enabler for security because it is consistent, it's reliable, and it's dependable.
I think that brings us to why you're here in Australia. The Australian government has gone live with the Everbridge population warning system. Maybe talk us into that, and I think that gives a good picture on the diversity of this particular platform as well.
Right. So we part of our offering, for lack of a better term, sorry, I'm not a sales guy, I'm a security guy, it is public warning, where entire countries can leverage the technology that Everbridge brings to the table to inform the population of the country about potential risks to themselves. That could manifest as a weather issue, it can, or anything else the government deems appropriate, right? So it will come out from the Australian government. It is powered by Everbridge. We do the same thing in a multitude of other countries, which shows the versatility of the platform itself, right? So a lot of organizations focus on the corporate security side. It's a big world, and it should be an inclusive world. And what that means is that entire countries, cities, states have to be protected. And the best way to do that is through multimodal communication, which Everbridge provides to the countries in a way that allows them to maintain connectivity with their citizens and advise them of issues that are deemed important to the government. It is important to note that Everbridge itself does not decide what that is. We only provide the technology that allows the organizations or the nations to protect the employees. So it's just think of it as duty of care on a national level.
Yep.
Right. So that's where it makes me very proud to be part of the company.
I was going to say it provides a degree of scale too, right? So it just shows you the scale that you can expand this out. So it gives you a big market. You could be a multinational, or you could be, sort of intrastate, even here in Australia. Again, it gives you a sense of scale on this platform.
Exactly. So, and that's the other thing that's nice about a SaaS platform is that it's infinitely scalable. It can be a country, it can be a company of 400, it can be a company of 2 million like Walmart, right? So it doesn't matter. That's the benefit of having that. When you think about how you protect your people, whether you're a country or whether you're a company, the expectation is the same. The duty of care just gets amplified when it's an entire country or a nation state.
What's the onboarding process? What's the sort of configuration process that a customer would go through? You mentioned templates and the like, so I imagine a lot of it is kind of structured for them, but then they just adapt it. But is there something like where they plug in their business continuity plans and their crisis management plans? They should already have these there, but then execution in terms of that response and monitoring over time. What's the onboarding process generally look like?
So we have an entire professional services division that helps a company execute the implementation of the platform. So the idea, and I can give you generalities, but every company is different based on the needs of the organization, right? So they will look at the modules that they want to acquire and use, and then they'll think about how they're going to integrate that with their own existing technology systems, whether it's their HR system, visitor management system, security camera system, etc. We want all that to tie together. So through APIs, all of that gets fed into the system, and then a professional services team arrives at the company and helps them walk through the execution of the implementation phase. We do that because our goal is not to sell you something. Our goal is to be a partner in helping you mitigate risk and vulnerability. You don't do that by, a drop and run. You do that by being an effective partner. And so that's how we look at our relationship with our customers. The teams will go, and then the other opportunity for them is to have a technical account manager who they can leverage during the implementation phase to help them make sure that they get the most value out of the system. It doesn't do us or the company that purchases any good if they don't understand how to use it and how to effectively deploy it in their own organization. So we're very, very focused on making sure that companies understand the value and how to use the system the way they want to use it, as opposed to how another company might use it.
And it's not a sort of a central platform. There's different sort of modules to this as well, right? They might there's a bit of a value add. They might not need the full platform or all of those aspects in terms of even say public warning, crisis management. There's others here in terms of safety and the visual command center. Is it something that is broken down and they can build over time? And as you say, the journey aspect where they can sort of add it into the business in terms of what their immediate requirements are?
It is, and not all companies need all things, right? Yeah. So the road to resilience manifests itself differently depending on what company you're in. And maybe you need a mass notification capability and a visual command center. Yeah. But maybe your employees don't travel. Maybe it's a static. So that would be a component that you wouldn't need. The idea is to create a bespoke solution that answers the needs of the organization that has the problem. So what we'll do is we'll work with them to determine, let's have a discovery session and talk about where the real challenges are.
Yeah.
And whether or not we can actually help you solve those challenges. And I meet with CSOs all the time, and I'll tell them point blank, look, I'm a practitioner in this space. If what we have doesn't meet your needs, I'm going to tell you that.
Yeah.
But I will also tell you that it's very rare that happens because we are the, this is probably not the right term, and I apologize up front, but we are the 800-pound gorilla in this space.
Got it.
We are the world's premier provider of this service, and we're very proud of what we've been able to develop. And we're most proud because it can be tailored to the needs of each company or each country. And that is something that you don't get from a lot of providers in this space.
Yeah, one of the questions I had was, I take it language can be adapted too, right? So because if you are a global company, those messages can be adapted and sent out in their local language. And so there's a lot of sort of smarts to this that provide that advantage. The other thing is, as a practitioner also, I'd be thinking most of the clients should already have a posture and an understanding where they are in terms of their own resilience, hopefully. I always say I'm an optimistic pessimist. I'm always, in terms of a security practitioner, should always be waiting for something to go wrong and having that expectations that something will go wrong and being ready for it. Complacency is the worst enemy. So I take it, do you find that maybe in terms of a closing observation, I know you haven't been in Australia long, but you mentioned you've been here before. How are you finding how you've been welcomed here in Australia, and the interest also in the region as well?
Right.
I will mention we're going to be up in Singapore with Everbridge next week, but yeah, just the region, initial observations on our resilience readiness here.
So a couple of thoughts on that. Number one, the reception here has been absolutely wonderful. I've found that shockingly to some people, the challenges are the same regardless of where you are in geography in the world. We all, as security practitioners, we all basically face the same challenges. And sometimes it's reassuring when somebody hears that, well, you know, I was in Munich 2 weeks ago and they had the exact same challenge that you're having today.
Yeah.
Not that it makes it easier to take, but it makes it a little bit easier to understand. So what I like about that is that what I have found in Australia is that there is an appetite for resilience. And there is an appetite. I've been so far in Australia and New Zealand. The appetite exists in both countries. And the idea is, how do we make our organizations more resistant to the next potential disruption? And so we all talk about it differently, but what we're really talking about is resilience. And so that appetite is here, and it's huge. And I think that organizations understand that the pandemic has taught us one thing, is that we don't know where the next disruption is coming from. So having a platform that is risk agnostic actually gives you the better opportunity to maintain that resilience going forward. I'm very much looking forward to the visit to Singapore and to talk to the organizations there. I have met with the largest banks in New Zealand and Australia, and find them to be incredibly hungry for this type of resilience. And it's refreshing to me to have the openness and candor that I've had in the meetings here with the Australian businesses, and very much looking forward to continuing that relationship as we move forward. We have a great team here in Australia and New Zealand. I've only touched on just a little bit of the capabilities of the organization, because, you know, this is not a sales pitch. It's really about how we can help organizations with their resilience journey. The team here is phenomenal. I've been very fortunate to meet with some really outstanding professionals, both in Everbridge and in the companies that we visited.
Yeah.
I will tell you that it's nice to see that CSOs, regardless of where they are geographically, all face the same challenges and all have the same frustrations, and we can actually try to help with that.
I think that's right. It's definitely a global business, the security domain, but also the resilience. I think resilience is really not made a comeback, but I think the importance of resilience now, I think companies finally get it. And as we talked about, their security is a business driver now, and it allows businesses to go faster with a bit more degree of safety and assurance. So look, Tracy Reinhold, Chief Security Officer with Everbridge, thank you so much. A pleasure to meet you, and best for your travels here in Australia and into the region.
Thanks, Chris. I really appreciate the opportunity.